Okay, so today we're going to learn how to solve polynomials if we can't factor these things. So as you can see for this first one, is you should notice that there is no way that I can factor this x cubed because it has more than two terms. And then if I try to pull something out, like I could pull an x out of this, this, and this, but this doesn't share an x. So right now, there's no way to factor this thing. So they have to give us some additional information. The additional information that they give us is that x minus 2 is a factor. So if they give you that x minus 2 is a factor, well, what a factor means is a factor can divide this entire equation. So if you took this and you could divide this entire equation by that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this thing and divide this entire equation. Now we could use long division, which would look something like this. But long division takes a little bit, so we're going to use something that's a bit faster, which is synthetic division. So if you remember, synthetic division means make this thing a 0. So 2 would make this thing a 0. That goes in the little box. Then I'm going to take the coefficients of each one of these numbers. So for us, it would be 1, -3, -10, and 24. We always carry the first term down, and then we always take this number and times it by this number up here. So 1 times 2 will give me 2. Then we add, and we get -1. Then we do the same thing again. 2 times -1 is going to give me -2. And -10 plus -2 will give me -12. And then 2 times -12 will give me -24. And -24 minus 24 gives me 0. And so our remainder is 0, which makes sense because we said this thing would divide. So this would be my x squared term, this would be my x term, and this would be my constant. So if we wanted to write this thing, we would have x squared minus x minus 12, and that thing equals 0. And then we always want to put what we divided it by out front. So we divided it by this, and this was what we got. Now this thing is going to be pretty easy to find its zeros. Like I can tell, oh, the 0 for this thing we already figured out from before is 2. And this will actually factor pretty nicely. So that would become x minus 3, or x plus 3, and x minus 4. Because -4 times 3 will give me my -12, but it will add together to give me -1. So the 0 for this thing would be -3, and the 0 for this thing would be 4. So these would be my answers. Again, if the thing won't factor from the beginning, so this thing won't factor from the beginning, we need to approach it a different way. So we're going to use what they give us to divide. And after we divide the thing, what we divided it by will go out in front. And what we get as our answer will go behind. We'll factor this thing, and we'll take that. Let's do one more example. Okay, let's say we were given this. This time, our factor is x is -1. So again, we want to divide this thing, but I don't want to use long division because that would take a while. You can, but I would not like to. So we're going to do the exact same thing we did before. What would make this thing equal 0? That would be 1. And then we pull out the coefficients. So 1, 4, 1, -6. Always drop down the first number. 1 times 1 is 1, so that would be 1. 4 plus 1 is 5. 5 times 1 is 5. 1 plus 5 is 6. 6 times 1 is 6. Negative 6 plus 6 is 0, which is our remainder is 0. And then we'll write down these terms, which would be x squared plus 5x plus 6. And out front should be what we originally divided the thing by. So that was a negative 1. Okay, again, so that we put out front, and our answer we put in there. This answer is really easy to get, which is 1. We have to factor this thing. So x and x, well, that's going to be x plus 3 and x plus 2, because 3 times 2 will give me 6, and 3 plus 2 will give me 5. So these answers should be negative 3 and negative 2. And there are my 3 answers. For these problems, again, you want to make sure that you take the factor, and a factor really literally means it can divide the polynomial. So you take the factor and divide it, and then whatever you get left over, you'll factor it one more time and get a final answer. Try some of these problems.